Sarah, bonjour.
Bonjour.
Thank you so much for joining me in my podcast, Lucky Last. Let me introduce you. You are an Australian coach and athlete who compete in triathlon and Ironman championships. You are ex-army and you are the ambassador of New South Wales Triathlon. You developed and built a very strong mindset to push your limits. And you founded Good to Go Mindset to help individuals in their health journey and push their limits as well. On top of that, you're a mom of 2 boys, and I like to mention it because I think it's so important to say it. Yes. And I'm very excited to have you in my podcast today to hear about your journey. So thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So let's start where it started. You almost did 20 years in the army. You are ex-army. Why did you decide to go to the army initially?
Well, I never had a strong desire to join the military. However, I did have 3 grandparents who served in the military during World War II. So I had a bit of a heritage from the family connection, and also my older brother went into the army 2 years or sort of straight after he left school. It still wasn't the most appealing idea to me. I just sort of had a bit more awareness, having family then moving around that space. And my dad, who actually was an accountant, said to me, well, I think you would meet some great people in the military. You could have many adventures. You already love sort of physical activity, which would be part of the daily life. And also he was an accountant and he didn't want to pay for my university. So he brought these brochures home for the Australian Defence Force Academy, which is in Canberra, where students, basically school leavers, go, they join the military, but they also complete a university degree, paid for by the Defence Force, whilst at the same time completing military studies to become an officer in the military.
Did you become an officer?
Yes.
Okay.
So after 3 years of a degree plus an additional full year of leadership and military training to become a lieutenant in the Australian Army. So 4 years in total of training.
How it is the army, because it's a very predominant male industry, if I can say, and you were quite young. How did you manage this?
Yeah, it was a bit of a culture shock, moving from being, straight from high school to into the military. And you're right, at that time when I joined in the mid-1990s, there were about 6% women in the army. So we were quite a stark minority within that workplace. However, I think that the foundation of the military is teamwork. So we were really encouraged to look after each other within the organisation and encourage each other. And, you're only as fast as the slowest person, if that makes sense. So you've got to, as a team, pull each other along together. I mean, at the time there were some cultural issues that are still being sort of worked on to improve the culture in sort of, industries that are sort of male dominated. They're working really hard to make sure that it is an inclusive and good place for women to also be. And, I've been part of that journey, being, having my own experiences within, not all great experiences within the military.
So when have you been deployed? Because you've been deployed, we were talking about that just before.
Yes.
Was it a few years after you got your lieutenant status?
So I graduated in 2000 as an officer in the Australian Army, and from there completed it was 6 years before I actually deployed to do the job I was trained for and had been training for in peacetime, I guess, to deploy to Iraq with what's called the Overwatch Battle Group in southern Iraq, based on an infantry and armoured cavalry fighting unit. I was attached as an intelligence officer to that battle group to provide the top secret strategic intelligence overwatch for that group that were in Iraq for 7 months.
Okay. How was it? I guess I can imagine you can't say everything, but how was it mentally?
Well, I was actually, when I was leading into the deployment, we did a lot of what they call pre-deployment training to get you to work together as a unit that would be going over to work together. So I spent a number of months in Darwin with the units that I was attached to. So I was actually really hyped and looking forward to the experience because I'd done so much training and practicing on exercises in and around Australia to be able to do my job in a combat or warlike environment. So it was kind of like the pinnacle of your career in the military. And so I was really pumped and I was excited and I felt privileged to be a part of the Australian Army deploying to do what our sort of forefathers did back in Gallipoli in World War One, sort of that real pride to serve and wear the uniform. And so, yeah, I had a really reasonably good mindset going into the deployment to Iraq. However, I think during my time there, I really had a reality check of actually what combat's about and what an environment like, the Middle East was still sort of seeing the issues that are playing out 20 years later. And that was quite confronting being there to see the fighting between tribes and it was at the time when Saddam Hussein had been caught and put on trial, and he was actually hung during my deployment for the war crimes that he'd committed. And so that saw a spike in the enemy activity. So it was a very full-on time. There was just, long days. There was a lot of pressure. There was incidents where we were being attacked, indirect bombing, when the guys are going out on patrol to either train the local forces or to look for roadside bombs and things like this. The sort of pressure was quite high on me, being an intelligence person, to make sure we had the right information we were giving those people going out to ensure they were safe, as safe as possible. So yeah, it was, I think that intensity and that pressure was an element that I don't think you can really prepare for, on top of, the reaction certain individuals like I did have to when bombs were dropping around.
Yes.
That reaction I had was different to many of my colleagues. I didn't cope so well, but at the time I didn't talk about it. I just sort of internalized how I was feeling, because that was very much the way we were brought up in the military. And I think that is why down the track, post my deployment to Iraq, I did suffer from what's known as post-traumatic stress disorder.
That's a good point you mentioned. I think the armies everywhere in the world is probably opening up a bit more about PTSD and how they can help their team to work on that. But I guess at that time it was probably not such a thing. And as you said, I think in the army, the less you talk, the better it is. You don't want to be the weakness element of your team starting to talk, because people could look at you and say, why we don't talk about this thing. Yeah. So you've been deployed for 7 months. Did you realize at that time that it was impacting you badly mentally, or you just try to leave it on the side and we'll see that later?
I think initially it took a few months to start developing these symptoms, what I would now know to be post-traumatic stress. But so because I was so hyper-focused on my job, I think, and working sort of 16-hour days non-stop, 7 days a week, I think that you just sort of, your body and mind goes into this sort of overdrive, and you're just sort of in coping and survival space. So I guess it wasn't until later in the deployment I started to have physical symptoms start first. I was losing weight, my hair was falling out, I was super vigilant, any noise I was jumpy, and then nightmares started as well because of a few things that had happened earlier on in the deployment. I started to, they just kept playing out when I would have the rare time I got to sleep, and then I just wouldn't have good quality sleep. And I think bad sleep, just compounds when you're not in a good headspace. So yeah, I think it was a perfect storm of, by the time I left, I was a bit of a wreck. Yeah. Like I wasn't functioning very well. I was just getting through the days and focused on that finish line, which was my exit date from Iraq.
And how was your return? Did you get some support when you came back?
No, not really. I mean, they did what they call a so staging our way out of Iraq. We stopped in Kuwait for 5 days for decompression, where we got to speak to a psychologist. But because, they're trying to pump through 500 people in a day or two, you get 5 minutes with a psychologist to sort of ask. And so they sort of tick and flick, yep, you're good. I felt like, I really would like to tell you some more things that have been happening for me. But there just wasn't the capacity at the time.
So did you have some time off when you came back to Australia and then went back to training, I guess, or how did it?
No, I think when I got back to Australia, I think the symptoms bubbled up more and I was not sort of adjusting to life back in Australia. Yeah, everything was sort of, I was just on alert all the time. And it was at that point I decided maybe I wasn't suitable for the military and the way I was feeling. And my brother, who was in the army at the time. So I said, what's going on with you, sis? You're just totally different. I think maybe you need to speak to somebody. Maybe you should get some help, which I completely went like this too. And just said, no, I'm just done. I'm getting out of the army. So instead of discharging at that point though, I took 2 years leave without pay because it was just an easier process administratively. So that's what I did. And I just ran away. I just basically packed up my life and moved overseas, to England. Because I met a man and I thought, well, maybe I could just completely run away and sort of compartmentalize what
Don't
that
deal
life
with
was.
it and, forget everything about it and just move to the other side of the world and hopefully it will leave me.
Yeah, exactly. So that was the strategy at the time. And I think that a lot of people maybe do that.
Did it work?
No. Well, it did temporarily because obviously I moved over there. I completely stripped my identity. I was Captain Sarah Hingston at the time. I was not that anymore. I was completing a master's degree, got some odd jobs living in England for 12 months in Northern Ireland, and I did some sort of fitness instructor training, so I could teach sort of fitness classes where I was working in Belfast and overseas. So yeah, I just sort of changed identities for a bit of time and just literally didn't watch the news, didn't look at anything to do with the Middle East, didn't talk about it with anybody.
Did you still have these nightmares or?
Yeah, every so, over time, the further away from Iraq I got, the less intense it was. So kind of at that time, it kind of was working okay. And I think I am aware now that doing that wasn't the right move, because if I'd actually kind of sat there in the pain, I guess, or sat there in the trauma and worked through it with the help of a professional, I wouldn't have had the prolonged years of suffering post, that period, which I'm happy to talk about a little bit. But yeah, I think that really, firstly, prevention is better than cure. If you're knowledgeable on the fact that these things can possibly happen to you, or you never know until you're in a scenario. You never know how you're going to respond to something quite traumatic. So, but if you have the awareness as much as you can, and that's why I really love the fact that nowadays kids are being, we have conversations about mental health. It's just normal.
Yes.
So this will help people to just, have that education around how do I give myself the best chance if something really bad happens to me to come through it in the least painful way.
Yes.
Yeah. So years kind of just sort of pretending I didn't have any issues. And then I think it was when I came back into Australia, at the time I was engaged to a British Army guy and he'd deployed to Afghanistan. So I came back to Australia and I re-engaged in the Australian Army to, I sort of was running out of money and needed a job. And it was just easy to come back to the Army.
Of course, yes.
And then I started going back into the intelligence jobs that I'd been in. I think the job that I was... there was a 1 year of where I was sort of doing different work, more domestic security focused, counter-terrorism, Australia-based focused. But then I was moved into a role where I was literally the analyst for the Middle East.
Okay.
In an intelligence agency in Canberra, and it just all came flooding back.
Yeah, okay.
When I just started to focus in on that.
So this is where you said, I need to do something about it?
Not quite.
Okay. You're like pushing. Let's see how far I can go before it crumbles.
Totally. I sort of just yeah, these symptoms started coming back, but I just, I just sort of tried to ignore them again. And then that sort of went on for 18 months until my father was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And that's when I just, it was just this, your dad's got less than 6 months to live.
Oh my God.
And I just completely
You dropped.
broke down.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was, I was just probably keeping the head above water at that point anyway. So I think that's what I'm saying about if, you have the opportunity to work through. At the time, I might have had a better experience of the last few months with my dad, because not only was I, devastated watching my dad deteriorate, I was mentally not great.
Yeah.
It's a shame. And yeah, it was the start of rock bottom for me for a couple of good years.
Yes. And then you seeked help and you are now much better. You as well founded Good to Go Mindset to help people with their mindset and their personal health and fitness quest. Did this help you as well be better and finally feel like you are learning from what you went through and you are applying the solution to others?
Absolutely. I think, it sort of all started when I went to get that professional help, and I started seeing a psychiatrist, a psychologist, and did really intensive work, sort of like a 6-week intensive program on how to process trauma. And I also had to go on medication because the depression, I was also, I had PTSD and I had the depression. So it was either really super anxious or really, really low. So I was on advice, went on some medication, and that for about 18 months, 2 years helped me through that really dark period to kind of get the other tools I needed to get, to be able to move forward instead of stay stuck where I was. And I'm grateful for that, because I was always anti-medication. I never took Panadol when I had a headache. I think, I don't know why I was like that. Maybe, again, the way we were brought up in the military, you were a bit weak if you stayed.
Yeah, I was going to say that my grandfather, my uncle, on my mom's side, everyone was in the army as well. I was going to say it's very much an army thing to say, I don't take Panadol or I don't take anything. I have a headache, it will go away, Like it's really fascinating.
Yeah, right. So I've learned that that's not necessarily the best way. It means to, live well and be well. And so I worked through that period, and then I got into cycling through a military charity sponsored me to go over to Italy to ride bike up a couple of big mountains.
Cool.
So I literally rode my demons out up these beautiful mountains in the Dolomites in Italy. And I think that was the real start of the healing journey that led me to go on to do some awesome things that I've been doing in the last sort of 5 to 6 years in the physical, like triathlon world, Ironman world, and creating Good to Go Mindset, where I can have an avenue to use my own experiences, and not just from the headspace side, but physical side, how to achieve your goals. Because what I've found doing these really long endurance events like an Ironman is that like about 80% mental,
Yes.
20% physical. Yep.
So Ironman is almost 4 kilometers swim, 180 kilometers of a bicycle ride, and a normal marathon for running 42 kilometers. So it's a total of 226 kilometers, approximately. Yes. How the fuck do you do that?
Maybe need to leave. It's a bit crazy, look, it's something you can't just do, right? And that's, I think, for me, the best part about it was the journey to that event, that start line. So the training, the commitment, it takes a real commitment to that goal. And I feel like a lot of people sign up for things like a marathon or an Ironman because they do want to prove to themselves that they are capable, they can do this. However, it is requiring a big commitment over a period of time to do that in terms of training, because like I said, those early mornings, those weekends, 6-7 hours on the bike on the weekends, plus the sacrifice, on the family, or the impost on the family is a big deal. So you want to sort of do the best you can by everybody and in achieving that goal.
You think that without competing, in like triathlon and big sporting events, you will not be fully complete? Because it's as you said, it's a struggle not seeing your kids because you are going to these events and you're like, why am I doing that?
Yeah.
Is it as well for your mental health and just make sure that you are okay?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question that a couple of people, smart people, have asked me, is that when do you feel accomplished, or when do you feel like you've hit the achievement? Why do you keep doing them? And I think that initially it was like something to prove, maybe to other people, to myself especially, but now I just really actually love it. And I've created a community where I live called Yass Valley Triathlon Club. I founded that 2 years ago. Our little motive is the galah. We're Yass Valley Galahs. And we've managed to create a beautiful community of people who would never have imagined giving triathlon a go. A lot of women, because we've run a few free women's come and try triathlon over the past couple of years with grants from the New South Wales government. So I think it's a part of that as well, is that to say, it doesn't matter what your background is. It doesn't matter if you hate swimming, can't ride a bike or run. If you want to be a part of the community, you can in a supportive capacity, or we will help you to get that confidence to give it a go. I think it's that seeing that reward of others coming in and having a go and believing in themselves and giving that sort of a go, and that sort of ties in with the good to go mindset as well, the business. So yeah, I just love it for what it does for others. I love racing. I raced less than 2 weeks ago in New Zealand at the Ironman 70.3 World Champs, and literally 2,200 women racing on one day from around the world, and the energy and the vibe is just incredible. Yes. So it's kind of addictive.
Yeah. How do you prepare for this type of event?
Well, yeah, I guess I work full time. I have my side hustle, good to go mindset business. I raise 2 boys.
Yes.
So
tell me.
I think the fact that I've done quite a few over the past 7, 8 years, my body, you sort of build this foundation over time. So I think for this race, because I didn't feel I had done the quantity of training I should have. However, I had the best result I've sort of had in the last 5 years. So, it's a trial and error thing for me too. I probably was doing 8 to 10 hours a week training leading into this race, because I had to jam it in around work and things like that. So, but I really do think the more you do over your lifespan, you're putting deposits in your physical body bank. Yeah. The more responsive it can be when you go, right, I want to do that event, I want to go race that, I want to go and run that marathon.
Is there any misconception about running a marathon, a triathlon, or an Ironman? Is there any misconception that...
I think people make it harder than they think. I think once you're there, once you're on that start line, it'll happen, right? You're there because you've put yourself there, you've paid the money to enter. I think obviously you need to practice all the elements of the sport or whatever you're doing, make sure your body's prepared. Fueling, sleep, all those other things that go alongside a good physical performance is required. So you've got to really pay attention to those things as well. But I think we don't need to overcomplicate it too much. Remember, as kids, tomorrow's a school athletics carnival. Right, you're going to run the 800 metres, you're going to do long jump, you're going to do that. And you just did it. And they do, right? And they do really well. And then they feel a sense of achievement and the parents are proud. I just think we do need to do that more for us as adults.
Okay.
Just get amongst.
Fair point. Is there something that you could recommend to someone who went through a difficult journey in the army or not in the army, that has potentially PTSD but didn't acknowledge it? What would be the first step for these people?
I think that we have so many good supports now available, and it's not a one-size-fits-all. There are many different organisations and charities that out there that want to help people. Me as a woman veteran, there's not as many of us. There's no real research done on women veterans yet. That's on its way or in coming through. And so I think that, I think it's just important to say, right, okay, I feel like I need some help. What's the first step? Okay, let's see what's available. I'm more than happy if there's anyone out there for them to reach out to me to help them get on the right path for them, because like I said, it's not a one-size-fits-all process. Having been through a number of different support mechanisms, I feel like I can really speak confidently on a lot of different ways where you can look for help. So, yeah.
Quick question. If your son tell you tomorrow, I want to go to the army like you, what would you say?
Oh, yeah, this is a tough one, because I think if you'd asked me 6-7 years ago, I said, no way, no way. Now, as I look at myself back as an 18-year-old when I joined, and all the cool stuff I got to do, all the learning, all the mates that I made, all the friends for life, and now with what the sort of way in which defence and the wider community is talking about mental health and how do we be preventative, have a preventative approach to our health, I would say absolutely do what you want to do, and I would be very supportive.
That's great. That's great to hear. And now one more thing. Thank you, Sarah, for your time. One more thing. Anyone who wants to give it a go to a triathlon or an Ironman, or even just be a bit more present for their own health or fitness, what would you suggest to do?
I think just, start with sort of writing down what your goals are, what you would love to see for yourself, in 12 months, 2 years, 5 years from now. And then I guess, sort of put in a bit of a plan to get to that point, and have accountability. Definitely accountability. I have a coach. I've had a coach for nearly 6 years, the same coach. I've met him twice in person. He lives in UK. He's a ex-professional triathlete himself. So, and we just connect. There's that rapport. He gets me, he educates me on how I can be the best triathlete I can be. I think that for me was game changing.
Yes.
I went from just sort of surviving a triathlon, getting
Yes.
to the finish line, to getting faster, fit, dialed in, tuned in for actually then qualifying for world championships. And this year I won a world championship in duathlon. And never in my wildest dreams could have imagined that being a possibility. But with that accountability and that person in your corner saying, you are capable and this is how we're going to get there, alongside your own sort of drive, because you obviously need to get your shoes on and out the door yourself.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's a really strong one. And just sort of get your family or whoever your people are, get them bought into it as well. So they're encouraging you and they want to see that for you as well.
So you took your children, your boys, to New Zealand, and I think that it's an amazing role model that you provide to them, like seeing them traveling the world, doing the hardest and toughest athletic competition. I think it can only make them proud, I guess, and probably think that if mum can do it, I can do it too.
Yeah, I hope so. They've yet to do a triathlon. I know I won't be pushing them down that path, but I would love for them to feel like that they could do that. And I do think that we do need people to aspire to be like, and role models in our lives, and hopefully they're not too sick of being dragged around triathlon racing. I did see when they were on the sideline and I saw my boys and they were cheering, "Go Mum," that was worth all the suffering.
I can imagine, yes, beautiful. Okay, Sarah, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it, for your insight and sharing your journey. I will definitely watch the space and see which next World Championship you can win.
Maybe when I'm 50.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.